Ever feel like you're barely keeping your head above water, like drowning in to-dos? Everyone wants a piece of you and expectations are through the roof.
Yeah, sounds familiar.
Sadly, that's the reality for a ton of managers out there, right? And we're diving into something today that's, well, it's a lot bigger than just another case of the Mondays,
Oh, definitely.
manager burnout. But hold on, before you tune out, thinking, been there, stress that, get this. Coach Dane's calling this a hidden crisis for businesses, not just a personal struggle anymore.
It's interesting, right? Because burnout, it can be sneaky. We brush it off. Like, oh, they're just having a rough week. They'll bounce back.
Mhm.
But Coach Dane, in his blog post, The Hidden Crisis, Manager Burnout and its Impact on Business Health,
Mhm.
he digs into why this is way more serious than we tend to think.
It's almost like it hides in plain sight, you know? And Coach Dane, he doesn't just stop at a catchy phrase. He throws down some seriously eye-opening numbers on how many managers are feeling the burn, the exhaustion, the feeling like they're just going through the motions. And it's not just a handful, it's seriously widespread.
And that's where it gets kind of scary.
Yeah.
He compares it to a
The
virus.
virus.
Yeah, think about it, a virus. One manager, they're burned out, but it doesn't stop there. It starts to impact the whole team. Ever worked on a team where the leader, their negativity, it just brought everyone down?
Oh, absolutely.
It's like this domino effect.
Wow, that's a powerful image, that virus analogy. And in the blog post, he actually gives specific examples of how this viral spread plays out. You see it in things like decreased engagement, because honestly, who's going to be super gung ho when their boss is running on fumes?
Right.
And then there's higher absenteeism, because let's be real, who wants to drag themselves to work when the energy's like that? And then, of course, productivity, it tanks.
The whole system, it starts to break down.
Exactly. It's like this chain reaction.
And at the end of that chain, guess what? Company's bottom line, bam,
Ouch.
customer satisfaction plummets, innovation goes out the window. It's a disaster. And that's why Coach Dane, he's so adamant that this isn't just some nice to have perk you offer if you've got extra cash lying around. This is mission critical stuff. It's strategic. You want your business to survive. You got to address this.
So we're not talking about handing out an extra day of vacation and calling it good here.
No. This is way deeper.
This is way deeper.
Coach Dane, he's basically saying companies need to take a good hard look in the mirror. How are they structuring work? Are they setting managers up for success or setting them up to crash and burn?
Good question.
It's about creating a culture that actually supports mental health, where people can be open and honest about what they're struggling with without fearing judgment.
Yeah, without being penalized for, being human. So let's talk about how we actually do that, because creating a supportive culture, that sounds great in theory, but
Yeah, it sounds kind
where
of,
do we even start? It's like we all love the idea of a supportive culture, right? Sounds great on paper, but then when you actually try to picture it, like how do you make it happen, especially compared to something concrete, like, I don't know, launching a new product feature?
it's true. It feels almost like, what is it, too touchy-feely versus the hard numbers, the bottom line.
Yeah.
And I think that's part of why we end up with manager burnout in the first place.
Yeah, totally.
But what's interesting is Coach Dane, he actually says we need to get really specific. He talks about reassessing workloads,
Okay.
which again sounds simple, right?
Right. Reassess workload, sure.
But how many companies, honestly, how many are doing that regularly, systematically?
It's like everyone's so busy putting out fires that they don't stop to think, wait, could we maybe prevent some of these fires?
Exactly. And on top of that, he says it's not enough to just tell managers, oh, hey, managers stress better without actually giving them the tools.
Right. Like actually giving them support.
He's a big proponent of companies actually providing real mental health resources and not just here's a meditation app, good luck.
Yeah, it's got to be more than a Band-Aid. What does that actually look like? Like in real life, what are we talking about here?
So this is where it gets really interesting. His dynamic leader manager certification program. It's a really great example of this more holistic approach.
Okay.
And he's designed it specifically for those unique pressures of leading a team.
Because it's different, right? Being a manager is not the same as just, having your own individual workload.
Exactly. It's a whole different ballgame. And it goes beyond like your generic stress management tips.
So it's not just coping mechanisms, it's like actual skills.
Exactly. Building skills.
Hmm.
He digs into things like, work-life balance, because let's be
Good
honest,
luck with that one.
for most managers, that's a myth, right?
Especially these days. I mean, technology, it's supposed to help you disconnect, but then you're always reachable.
It's a double-edged sword.
Yeah. So what else is in this program? Like, what else does he zero in on?
One thing I thought was really interesting was his emphasis on empowering teams. You can't just like throw a manager a bunch of stress management apps and be like, all right, go forth and be less stressed.
Yeah.
You have to give them the skills to actually delegate effectively, to build that trust with their team so it's not all on their shoulders.
So it's about like changing the entire dynamic, not just expecting the manager to somehow become superhuman and handle it all.
Right. Because they're not superhuman, they're human.
It reminds me of that saying, about giving a man a fish versus teaching him to fish.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Except in this case, it's more like give a manager a stress ball.
Right. Like that's really going to solve the systemic issues here.
Exactly. But teaching them, empowering them to build those resilient teams, a supportive environment, that's where the real change happens.
That's sustainable change.
Yes. And that's where these leadership skills come in. The delegation, the communication, building that trust, like we were talking about. But then Coach Dane, he goes even deeper, talking about personal resilience, which I thought was so interesting.
Oh, absolutely.
Because it's one thing to have the systems, right? The support. But
Yeah.
leadership, it's inherently challenging. How do you prepare for that? How do you equip yourself to deal with all the curveballs life throws at you on top of everything else?
And that's what's so great about his approach. He gets that it's not just about fixing things from the outside in,
Yeah.
It's about that inner strength, that ability to handle the ups and downs, because let's face it, there are always going to be ups and downs.
Yeah.
And he actually says this focus on personal resilience, it's often missing from those traditional, management training programs,
Which makes sense because we focus so much on the hard skills,
right? The technical stuff.
but not so much on the inner game of leadership.
Exactly.
So interesting.
And it's why his program and resources like it, they're so important. They're giving leaders this more well-rounded toolkit. And, they're not just equipping them to survive, but to actually thrive. So I'm curious, thinking about everything we've discussed today, what's sticking with you? What really stood out?
What really struck me is how Coach Dane, he reframes the whole conversation. We tend to think of manager burnout as this problem that needs to be fixed, right?
Yeah.
But he's presenting it as an opportunity.
I like it.
An opportunity to create something better, healthier workplaces, sustainable workplaces, ultimately more successful organizations. And that's pretty inspiring, I think.
Absolutely. It's shifting from reactive to proactive,
Totally.
Instead of waiting for people to burn out and then scrambling, what if we created workplaces where everyone felt supported from the get-go, valued, empowered?
And everybody wins. The managers, their teams, the company. It's like this ripple effect.
Couldn't agree more. So if you're listening to this and maybe you're feeling that burnout creeping in yourself, or maybe you just, you want to be part of building a better workplace, you have the power to make a difference. It starts by recognizing that investing in well-being, it's not just like the right thing to do. It's the smart thing to do.
It's like Coach Dane says, when we guard the well-being of our managers, we safeguard the future of our businesses.
And that's a future worth fighting for, wouldn't you say? So as you go about your day, think about this. What role can you play, no matter where you are in your career, in creating that kind of environment, that more resilient, healthier workplace? It's something to keep in mind long after this deep dive is over.